Welcome to all three of you, and thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us. And with this, I'd like to invite Otto to the space to lead us on for this beautiful session today. Over to you, Otto.
Thank you so much, Disha, for this, holding this wonderful space and for introducing all three of us. So I will make the beginning, and then from there, so that will be the first 25 or so minutes, which will be a guided reality meditation. So I will say more to that in a second, and then from there we'll move into a moment of stillness and emergence, kind of where we'll go into the resonance and we'll kind of work with what's emerging kind of from that guided meditation. And the guided meditation has two parts. I will share a little bit something that I've been working on, and I haven't actually shared anywhere much over the past 3 months. So something kind of that really connects with the quote that you just read, which is also the field of possibility that we all as social innovators and social entrepreneurs feel around us. And I just tried to give it some different kind of language and visibility. And then I want to invite you to a little practice of journaling. So I will give you maybe a set of 6 or so questions. So if you have a pen, the only device you need really is a pen, a piece of paper, and yourself, right? So your own full presence. And if we start with that last one, so if maybe just at the beginning, I want to invite you to sit upright and comfortable and take a deep breath and relax for a little moment. Move your attention to the feet. So we are a community here coming together from around the world. Our feet are touching the same planet. Each of us in a different place, each of us touching the same planet. Feel the connection from your feet downward. Then move your attention up to your heart, where we can feel the connection to each other, to all of us in this community, all the different corners of the world, each of us working on our own initiative that is part of a larger whole. And then slowly move your attention further up to your head, attend to the space of possibility that it's extending upward from our heads. The space of emergence. The space of possibility. So with that and with another deep breath, please open your eyes. I would now invite you to a little guided visual current reality meditation. And as you all know, this is kind of a depiction of something that I have been using often in the past to depicting a social reality, the Iceberg Model, right? So my work, as some of you may know, is grounded in systems thinking, really. And usually what's used there is the Iceberg Model, right? So there is kind of the visible part of reality above the waterline. and then the deeper structures that determine the behavior of what's visible to the eye below the waterline. And that's kind of what systems thinking tries to focus on. That's what we as change makers try to focus on, the deeper root issues. But having grown up on an regenerative farm, I always thought, maybe it's time for a new metaphor here, right? The iceberg is good, but how about the field, right? When you have been working, those of you who are working with regenerative farmers, you know that yes, there is some attention to what's visible above the above the surface, but for all regenerative farmers, where all the attention goes is what's below the surface, the quality of the soil. And when I look at my current work today, I find myself, even though kind of I'm now living thousands of miles away from the farm, the regenerative farm I grew up on, I pretty much do the same thing, which is focusing on the quality of the soil. It's just that in my case, and in our case as social change makers, I would say, the soil is not the agricultural soil, but it's the social soil. And what is the social soil? It's kind of the soil of the social field. The social field is essentially the sum total of relationships that we enact with each other, with our planet, and with ourselves. So that's what you were talking about, Disha, in the beginning. And what's the invisible part? Right? It's the qualities of that relationship, and it's the qualities of awareness that we bring to these relationships. So that has been one source of inspiration for me. And the other source comes out of systems thinking. And what you see here is a wonderful quote by Ilya Prigogine, who says, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. So what he's talking about is bifurcation points, when a system is moving from one equilibrium to another one. In between, in these kind of bifurcation points, very small differences can have a huge impact, whether a system is moving into this or another direction. And that's kind of the small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. And then I believe for the underlying theory of change that I at least believe in, so has a very high significance. Okay, so if we look at current reality, what do we see in the visible realm of the social field? We see all the different sectors. And when we look at their evolution, we see striking similarities, I would say. For example, in agriculture, a shift from industrial agriculture to sustainable agriculture, doing less bad, to regenerative agriculture. Food as medium for healing planet and people. Education, right? Teaching for testing, the old model, to student-centric learning, that is better. But what we really are now moving towards is education for human flourishing, that is kind of more holistic, that works with the whole kind of learner, head, heart, and hand. In health, kind of similar development from evidence-based medicine to organizing the healthcare system around the patient journeys towards moving away from just combating symptoms of sickness toward strengthening sources of health, of human health, and also of planetary health. Sustainability in business, as we all know, kind of moving from the old stuff, resource efficiency, to product innovation, to really reshaping the purpose of business towards operating as a force for good. the mainstream often is still stuck in the outer sphere, but, we see elements, we see prototypes of these other spheres in many cases. Finance, from extractive to ESG to regenerative. Tech, we don't have the time to go into that. That would be a whole other session in itself. And underneath all of that, the evolution of governance from the exterior mechanism of governance, like markets and hierarchies, towards more participative forms that many of us are, active in, towards something that I would call acting from shared awareness or awareness-based collective action. Examples would be the Paris Agreement, where we did that on a planetary scale. But most of the examples for this way of operating come from local communities, place-based communities. So when we look at this, the mainstream still stuck here. The innovators moving here and the mainstream now moving towards, at least language-wise, right, into this space. But the true innovators, right, really now moving into this inner sphere here. What is the enabling condition to really shift a system from the outer to the middle to the inner sphere? And the enabling condition, I believe, is what's below the surface, right? It's the quality of relationship. It's the quality of awareness. It's the quality of that holding space. And it has to do with evolving the operating system from output and efficiency or system operating around ecosystem awareness to user-centric operating around stakeholder awareness to ecosystem and regeneration-centric operating around ecosystem awareness. So how does this shift of awareness from ego to ego show up in our interpersonal relationships? By deepening the quality of listening and by deepening the quality of conversation from debate to dialogue to collective creativity. How does it show up here on this side, more on the institutional side? As evolving, right, our leadership from traditional to more participative, and as evolving the work we move, the quality of civic engagement, kind of the work many of us are involved in, from advocacy to multi-stakeholder processes, to what many of us are, engaged in now, which is mission-driven enterprises and new ways of Town Hall 4.0, really as a word of new ways of engaging all the sectors. So we have this space of convergence here. So what is it we are noticing here? The themes of decolonizing, of ego to eco, and of sensing and actualizing emerging future possibilities. So what I'm really saying here is that when you look at the evolution of systems today, you can see them as the manifestation of an evolving human consciousness that works from ecosystem awareness towards stakeholder awareness, and from stakeholder awareness towards ecosystem awareness. And as we progress on that journey, we shift the mindsets from extraction to regeneration, from ego to eco, and the patterns of behavior from reacting against the past towards sensing and actualizing emerging future possibilities. And as we embody these principles, we begin to see examples where in these small islands of coherence, we begin to activate the much larger field of possibilities around us. That, I think, is a reality we all feel today, right? This field of the future here. But it's a reality that often isn't fully activated because it's lacking is supporting deeper structure, deeper support structure. So that's the main part really of this meditation. But I would also say this would not be a complete current reality meditation if we say that's all, because the reality is this is just one of two stories we all experience today. What is the other one? The other one is pulling us into the other direction. Techno Feudalism. So if you look at the first encounter with AI, through social media, we got mass misinformation, mass polarization, mass depression. Dark money, you see that in the US in particular, hyper extraction, look at the fossil fuel industry, undermining of democracy, polarization and war and civil war, the resurgence of authoritarian leadership styles, silencing and othering kind of all the filter bubbles, kind of including also extreme versions of cancer culture. We have the reduction of listening towards downloading. When all of this weakening of our collective response capacity happens kind of at the beginning of a whole new wave of ecosystem breakdowns and other related components. So what's the underlying in these, what's the shared pattern here? Is it Brave New World? Is it the Matrix? I think it has to do with a way with control, a whole new level of control and manipulation of human behavior at the level of the collective. That's what we are seeing today. And that's kind of the, and I put in the Brave New World here because it doesn't mean that people aren't happy, right? It doesn't mean that everything is breaking down tomorrow. It means that the real point of control is outside of our own agency in terms of what's happening in our larger systems. So I would say that's the situation today. We have these two forces, these two stories. And what is it that brings us together here? The possibility kind of to create these holding space to strengthen this space of possibility that we all feel and all experience here. But we are in a very fragile situation where things can go one way or another. And if we are able to form these small islands of coherence that embody these principles, what we begin to experience is an activation of this space of possibility that I think we all feel, that brings us into this space. That's what we all feel in face-to-face groups. And that's what we all know needs to also inform the transformation of the larger system. So that's the first part. And with that image in mind, I would like you to take your pen and a piece of paper, and I will give you one question at a time. It will be 7 or 8 questions, and I will give you a minute or so for each question. So you can just number your response, and in that minute, you just write down whatever is flowing through your hand. So you don't need to write down the question. I will give that later to you. Number 1. So the trick about journaling is just pen on paper, and you, in that minute, you just go with the flow. Number 1, when you look at the collective evolutionary mirror that I just shared with you, where do you see yourself? What is it you're noticing about your current work, your current organization, but also the context you're operating in. And you remember, so there was kind of the mainstream is the old model. And then kind of there's the, I would say, the ESG type, social sustainability, innovation space. It's kind of the 3.0. And then the interior space, which is really about regeneration, healing, the more deeper transformative space. When you look at that space of convergence that we all feel there, but it's also a space that doesn't have a support structure yet. What is it you're noticing about your own work, about your own context, about your own organization? Where do you see yourself? Where do you see your partners, your systems, your environment of stakeholders? Where do you want to be? Just take a moment to use this perspective as a lens to look at your own situation. Okay, that's number one. Question number two, what's holding us back to move into the inner space more fully? So why is it that the mainstream is still stuck some other place? What's holding us back? Okay. Number three, where in your current work and life do you feel the future? And when I use the word future, I don't mean something abstract. I don't mean what other people do in another place in a different time. For me, as I have learned from some of you and from many other innovators, future is something utmost personal. Future is something that we feel because it's a possibility that's looking at us, because it depends on us in order to manifest. You all know that, right? The future is very personal. It's a possibility that looks at us because it depends on us to manifest. What is it that you feel? So where in your current work and life do you feel the future? For some of us, that may be specific, concrete. For others, it may be amorph, vague. Whatever it is, it's good. Just notice it. Where do you feel the future? In your life, in your work, in your context, right now. Number four. So number four is moving more into deepening the understanding of that field of the future, right? So it's in part it's personal, in part it's what we saw on this map, kind of this interior space. It's the future of also of humanity, of the planet. It's kind of just, it's a little bit of that whole space. So we want to just attend more deeply towards that. So this kind of sense of future possibility, individually, but also collectively, that we all can feel, if you tune into that, and you all know kind of the old saying, kind of that, yes, kind of living systems theory. So systems theory today, people say, yeah, so social systems are living systems. So if we say, but I want to invite you to go one step further, which is that living systems are also living beings. That's what a social field is, right? A social field has an interiority. It has its own beingness. So if you connect with the field of the emerging future as its own being, right, that's looking at us, if that were a being that could feel, what might that being feel right now? All right. So my question is, if you connect with your sensing, your tuning capacities to the field of the future that's looking at us, and if that, field of the future were a being that would have feelings, what might be the feelings that this future has? Just write down some of the feelings, maybe different, maybe, okay, one or two. And now the next step. So if the, in number 5, if the field of the future were a living being that could speak, what would that being say to us now? What would that being say to you now? So again, if the field of the future that we can sense were a living being that could speak, what would that being say to you now? Number 6. So number 6 is if we could fast forward our life to the last moment, so when we are going to face the threshold of death, and when just before we pass this threshold, so if we imagine we could stand still, turn around, and look back at the wholeness of our lives and works journey, which at that future point will be all behind you, behind us. So if that moment comes, and if we stop and turn around, and if you stop and turn around and look back, what is it that you want to see? In other words, what is the footprint you want to leave behind on this planet when it's time for you to move on? So just put yourself into this imaginary space of the future. At the end of your life's journey, turn around, look back, and ask yourself that question. What is it that you want to see? Feel it, write it down. And then the last one is really from that same space. If we, from that imaginative space of coming to the end of our journey, looking back, and if we now, from that imagined future space, look back onto our current situation, right? If you look at yourself, but also us as a community here coming together, if you could give yourself and ourselves as a community one or two pieces of real advice from that future space, what would that be? So again, put yourself in your mind to the end of your journey. When you face that threshold, turn around, look back, and look at your current situation, the current moment we are in 2023, with all these possibilities around us. If you could give from that future place to yourself and to ourselves one or two pieces of advice, what would that be? Feel it, empathize with your other self, the 20 in the current moment, and then speak that advice to yourself and write it down. So that last one is really the advice we are giving from ourselves to ourselves. So when you have done so, what I would suggest now is just go quickly to the chat and write that advice into the chat, because it might be really interesting to see to share that just a little bit among us. So just write down your one or two lines into the chat that you just wrote onto your paper. And then Arhan and I can maybe read out just a few of those.
Find the courage to trust love. Be poor, be humble.
Trust the process.
Learn to listen.
Have balance and focus.
Wake up, everybody. Do not lose hope.
Empathize with others.
Let your light shine. Don't look away from your darkness.
Have empathy with yourself too. Let go and love all.
Challenge your perception.
I see myself transforming from ego to eco.
Slow down. Speak and communicate openly and authentically. Let go of fear. Learn from nature.
Show kindness and caring to all. Let your light shine. Don't look away from your darkness.
Reality is perfect. Don't fight it. Think about a better reality and work to create it. Be in flow with life. trust life, love, and our humanity.
Be mindful of the impact your actions have. Take a moment to reflect in the why before rushing to the how.
Keep focused and pray for wisdom.
Meet with, listen to, learn from, and share generously with young people.
Be brave. Be as kind to yourself as to others, and mind your boundaries as they define your identity.
Be in flow with life, trust life, love, and our humanity.
Doing work alone holds us back.
Reality is perfect. Don't fight it. Think about a better reality and work to create it.
Relate, do, develop. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing whatever is coming up, whatever's emerging for you on the chat. Just judging by the number of reactions, we do live in a social media generation, and so seeing a lot of likes and loves and hearts, so it gives a sense of, again, the shared resonance that we're all experiencing in this moment. Thank you, Otto, for, I think, that very beautiful and I think really powerful image, and I think the meaning that it had. And speaking of resonance, I think what was amazing in this moment, coming up for me, is actually on my desk. There is this image that I just want to bring up, and it says, "The only way out is in." So that's an image that stays, and so to me, the beautiful globe that you kind of put out there, it had this inward kind of direction to it, and so it does seem like, the only way out of some of the challenges that we're facing, is by going in at every level, at the level of the individual, organizations, the entire ecosystem. So thank you again for bringing that to us. And I think many people here might not know, but actually one of those small islands of coherence is something that I had a chance to be a part of several years ago. So it's in 2018, about 5 years back. CollabX, the organization I currently run, was actually a part of one of the Presencing Institute and Otto's programs called ULab 2X, and so I think that infrastructure created a small island of coherence for me, for my team. So very grateful for that. Thank you. So with that, excited to go deeper, explore, I think, some of the dimensions, and Karima, very keen to bring you in, and something, we spoke last week. We just known each other for a week. It feels much longer, but something that you said, Karima, stayed with me, and I just want to bring that back up. It's amazing again how these things connect. So Otto spoke about shifting the metaphor. The field is something that we have to pay more attention to, and if you go onto Tamkeen's website, in big bold letters, this is what it says: "We are the gardener and the garden." So just wanted, bring you in, Karima, and want to understand. So Otto's talking about the field. We need to pay more attention to the soil, the field, of which is a relational field, and you're talking about we are the gardener and the gardened. So what do you mean by that, and what does that mean for Tamkeen?
Arhan, thank you so much. Otto, that was beautiful. Very moving. And what was very moving is this amazing resonance that I was able to read and that you both of you read so beautifully. I feel very moved. I feel very moved because what I read, what I heard in the chat is very much what I hear here with our different partners in the education system, in the neighborhoods, in the villages. I just came from Marrakesh, an area that has been devastated, that is knowing this despair, death of loved ones, destruction, and yet there is so much humanity expressed. So if you go and talk to the different people there in the different villages, which I did like 2-3 days ago, this is what they would say in the midst of devastation. And there is so much in Arabic, there's a word of hamd, so much gratitude to be able to see the devastation and yet also to hold the beauty there is. Going back to the garden and the garden, this is very much what we are learning, to find the language of realizing that initially thinking of a process that started like 14 years ago as we're going to leave the engineered processes, we're going to go back to understanding being in the humility of things, that you cannot pull a plant up, you cannot change things. Whoever has children knows that very well. You don't change your own children. And to be in the humility, and isn't that, Otto, humility and humus, they share root. Isn't that the wisdom of the language that we speak? And to say, wow, we are the gardeners. And then with time to realize that, well, wait a minute, let's reflect really what is happening. If I'm the gardener, but the garden is creating its own conditions. The leaves are falling, they're composting, they're enriching and nourishing the soil, and the trees are bringing the shade for the seedlings to be able to grow. And when you look at that, you go to the humus. You're becoming humus. And in the becoming humus, you realize that you are creating conditions with the garden. So gardener and garden, creating conditions. And I think that today what we are really experiencing, and we're able to find the language for, and still looking for the language for, in order to be able to grow the understanding of it, to realize that we are the gardener and the garden. And it's in that the very and that talks about the humanity that defines me and connects me to Arhan and Otto and Debbie and all the friends that we are here sharing this space. What is the language of that and with a very sense of agency, no longer recognizes itself, amazes itself, actually finds a peace because there's not that weight here in my shoulders. There is a deep trust. And it's a trust that goes beyond, I trust myself, or beyond, I trust you, but it's a trust that speaks out, we trust our humanity. I meet you, Arhan, I meet myself. Isn't that beautiful? This is what happened to me when I was in the villages with the different communities. An extraordinary meeting of my own humanity and the humanity of everyone I met. And today, with all that is written here in this chat, isn't it another expression of that? How little did it need for all this to come? Did anyone talk about a project? Did anyone talk about structure? Did anyone? No, we all went to love, to trust, to empathy. But we also recognize that we need the courage. But isn't it amazing that human beings, the courage we really need is the courage to trust in our own potential. And that potential we come to realize, and on this beautiful process, is that it's very much to trust our humanity. So this is my resonance in the mirror, how I heard all this, how I heard this beautiful sharing of Otto, and this mirror that you're bringing in, Otto, and in the mirror of Temkin.
Thank you. Beautiful, Karima. And as you were sharing, like, there's almost different stories that we can hold. And so there's one story and that one reality, Marrakesh, what you described, there is violence, there is hurt, there's some of that. And we need to shift that in some way. And I think a word that's come up a few times, it came up while I was journaling as well, was fear. And so just if there are moments that you've experienced where groups of people have been able to let go of fear, and step into this other story which you're describing, but often it seems like there's so much fear that's holding us back.
I'll tell you a story. It was in 2019. I think I shared it with you, but I'll share it with the friends who haven't heard it maybe. In 2019, we were invited to one of the neighborhood communities, which is called the neighborhood of the olive tree. And the idea was to say, well, where are we in this process? And a young man said, well, we were in the cafe yesterday and we were talking about violence happening in the neighborhood. And we reflected, we said, why are we talking about it like this? And then he said, we realized that we used to expect violence every day, every week, every day. When I talk about violence, it's terrible violence, like yielding to death, to terrible hurt in the neighborhood. And he said, we started thinking, and he said, but we realized that for almost 2 years, we haven't had violence. And they said, what happened? What changed? And look at this beautiful unfolding of the reflection, going back to the awareness. Then he said, well, the houses are the same, the streets are the same, the people are the same. Nothing has changed, but everything has changed. He said, before violence used to bring us together, today love used to brings us together. And he added, before we used to define an objective, find the gangs in the neighborhood, in the neighboring neighborhoods. We would define an objective, a strategy, look for resources. Today, love brings us together, and we realize that all the initiatives that we are co-creating are only but a reason to remain together. That is a moving. This is a pas de côté. This is a pas de côté that expresses and manifests a sense of self. And furthermore, this very same young man, a few months ago, met with this researcher, and he says, well, before Tamkin, you said there was violence, and today there's love. And he says, no, I never said that. I say that before there was love, and today there is love. But yesterday, love was not expressed with love. Today, we express love with love. That manifests a sense of self resting in love. The very question of what is my value dissolves here is no longer a question. Nothing extrinsic from myself can tell me what I'm worth, can tell me what I'm valued, because I know that love is there. That was deeply moving. And this young man went to the villages with me. He's actually a team member now. And he shared this story. And that was a beautiful mirroring. Something that all could recognize. There was no anger. There was no fear. Though there is fear, people are still living in their tents because they refuse to sleep in the houses, but yet they all come together and the fear dissolves. And they were telling us that we come together and there's no fear. The very night at 11, in a few seconds, everything got destroyed. They said, we went into the streets with fear, but it was amazing. We came together and that fear dissolved. And then an old man from the neighborhood, from the village, started telling us stories, all stories. This is what we have in us, human beings, sharing this humanity. And it doesn't matter what extreme conditions, situations, we can always bring it back. So I will finish with something, a realization. If we come to think about the expertise we developed to dehumanize the context in which our lives unfold, an extraordinary expertise, how those organizations, schools crystallize this fear and this need for control, we still haven't dehumanized the human being. In this beautiful field, you were saying, Otto, in this beautiful garden, we're just need to be able to recognize the beauty. And then all comes alive again.
Thank you. I think what you shared, nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. There's something that shifted there. Otto, as you were listening to that, I think wearing the hat of the system scientist as well as the practitioner who's been there in these spaces, like what are you seeing and hearing? Like what happened there? What was the soil? What enabled it?
Well, I would, I mean, number one, I would be very interesting also to hear from others around us, kind of what their answer is to that question. But just speaking for myself, I'm intrigued, Karima, by all the resonances that you shared. Particularly about we are the garden and the gardener and the garden, right? So, and that's really, it's such a beautiful, it's accurate image of also what I try to do as action researcher, right? Because if really kind of the gardener and the garden, if you can't separate that, how can you stay on campus, right? In academia, if you study social change, right? There is only, you have to become the garden. Otherwise, you don't have the data that matters, right? To our understanding. So also everything you said about courage and love, right? So it reminded me. So Arhan, you mentioned ULAT, right? So once a year in Presencing Institute, we do this, usually there is a group of 7, 10, 15,000 people, change makers from around the world coming together. And then for, it used to be 3 months, kind of, we have shortened that to make it more accessible now. And we're just kind of in the midst of the new delivery of that. But we are asking, so it's a little microcosm, right, of change makers from all over, really. And then we ask them, okay, what's exactly this question, right? What's holding you back? And what you said, fear, right? Fear is always number one or number two, right? And how to the support you need to really move forward now, right? So what's kind of the true support you need, and kind of these deeper holding spaces and the loving attention and so on. That's always kind of also kind of one of the top two there. So it is interesting when you look at that, because it means that the main thing that's holding us back, and the main thing that we would need to really fully go for it, whatever that means, okay, right? But give it our all, right? Give it our all. And to be all in is, are these interior dimensions, right? It's not, because you would think, well, it is like resources, and it's also true, right? If just speaking for our own organization, like all of us, right? Yes, it's resource, all these other things, but essentially kind of it boils down to these things that we actually can control. So it's a very empowering message when you really think about that. And so the humility, humus, I would add humbleness to that, right? It's all the same word. You're so right. I mean, I love it, right? So that's really, that really speaks to this deeper interior condition that needs more cultivation. And that's where I think kind of, that's what we all work on and we all depend on, right? Because we all are the gardeners and the garden. It's true for each of our projects and initiatives, but then there's this shared space, kind of. That's, I think, the most important thing about the image that I showed, right, was the moment when there is the empty center, because there is this space, but it's empty. It's empty because it's huge space, huge possibility, but it's also lacking support structure. among others, you can't fund this damn stuff, right? Because no one is understanding that. They say, well, I need to count something, right? And it needs to be tangible next year and so on. No, you can't count that, right? Everything that's systemic, right, is a lot more intangible because it's below the surface. And so I think that's where we collectively, so I guess where my question goes is, yes, we see all these resonances on the interpersonal level that you, Karima, and also I talked about, and that we all experience. And yet, we cannot be blind to what's happening in the larger space around us. And so I am like in part of my own activity is, so yes, I work on grassroots level. I also work with these bigger institutions. I mean, I'm working as part of, in part, like for MIT, like a big mainstream academic institution. So I also have occasion to look into the souls a little bit of these people inside these big institutions. And what I'm seeing is they're just the same. They have the same questions, right? The same fear, right? The same this and that, maybe more fear, but but it's not like it's a totally different breed. They just made different choices, right? And they were maybe situated and socialized a little differently for some. So the puzzle to also seeing the need and possibility there, but often not really fully happening or only in small ways, that also has my attention. So that's really, so it's more like a puzzle. I don't really have anything to add. For me, kind of this bigger space, the empty center, right? It's a possibility that we feel, but it's also something that isn't fully attended to by us. And if I have learned in my work, what have I learned in one sentence? What does it take to change a system? And the answer is, what it takes is you need to shift relationships. How do you shift relationships? By shifting consciousness. How do you shift consciousness? By making a system see and sense and invert itself. See itself, okay, the mapping. Sense itself, you really need to feel it. You need to open your heart. And inversion really is the inner and the outer. It's kind of understanding that unless I have a deep shift here on this level, which is the gardener, right? The garden is not going to get any better, right? So what matters to the garden is what's happening inside the gardener. And that's what I'm sitting with. What does that mean for our larger system situation?
I would really love to resonate with that, Arhan, but I'll let you.
No, please go ahead. I saw you unmute yourself, so please, yeah.
Yeah. In July, had a meeting with the Minister of Education in Morocco. And I'll go to that meeting because there are, as you know very well, there are certain moments, that reveal, that manifest a process. And that was for me one of the moments that was revealed so much. He is also the head of the Commission for the New Model of Development in Morocco. He asked me, how do we evaluate a process that is emerging and organic without being in the way of the process, without breaking that very process? And he was asking about what we understand and what we call together with all our partners a Temkin process. He says, Karima, are you telling me that we don't need to evaluate, because if the ecology, the school communities become communities of understanding, communities of learning, we will have the performances that we're looking for, because this is the Ministry of Education. We need to look at the performance of a system, and the performance are numbers. The mere fact that at that level of the ministry, we are asking this kind of questions is already a manifestation of a transformation. So what does Temkin bring in this process at that moment? Is just a mirror. So when we ask, so what is unfolding at the regional level, where we are experiencing this Temkin process with the regional education system? I talk about all the experiences we have with our partners. I talk about emerging governance. I talk about school ecologies transforming. I talk about all the things that I have been witnessing and very much become the mirror. It's a system recognizing itself as growing out of itself, from itself, into itself, very much like the seed. Isn't it extraordinary? A seed grows out of itself, from itself, into itself. By the way, in Arabic, seed, hebba, has the same root as love, hub, which is something that we can meditate on.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yes, I knew you would like that. So, when a system, today, I had just left, just before arriving here, I was with the province level governance body of education system, where the director is co-facilitating the conditions for an organic process to emerge, where schools, directors are invited to a process. And that process, we are seeing how schools and neighborhoods and villages are becoming one. You know, the distinctions that can be so facilitating sometimes, but after a while they become in the way of how we see things, are starting to dissolve. We're experiencing what we're calling community-based learning and understanding ecosystems. Very long way to say something that, where at the end of the day, the walls are no longer there. This is what we are experiencing at the education system. And if there is a societal system that has an extraordinary amplification potential, is the education system. But when this process is embedded in a reflection national of the new model of development, and when at the ministry level, the facilitation is no longer the education system, but much wider, then it's quite extraordinary. But what we've learned, and very much this year, is that in the process, we might have antagonistic processes unfolding, actually most of the time. So how do we learn, and with all this polarization and antagonism, and this is what I would love to continue this conversation with you, Otto. How do we learn to see the confluence? How do we learn together to go to that confluence, to go to that unity of opposites? This is what we are trying to facilitate and co-facilitate with all our partners. So this is very much in resonance to what you said there, to the question that you were asking. This is something I felt so strongly this year, seeing extraordinary things happening. We call them مكانة تحول, metamorphic niches. Metamorphic is a process of transformation emanating from the immanent potential, beyond the form, going to an essence that we can all recognize. Actually, today in the education system, the language is, how do we humanize the education system? أنسنة المنظومة التربوية. Complete shift of attention. How does what I do reflect a process of أنسنة المنظومة? A humanizing education system, a humanizing administration, a humanizing. That doesn't mean that we don't humanize. We humanize something. No, we are experiencing a process of humanizing together. That doesn't mean that there's no humanity. No, love was there before, and love is here today. But yesterday we did not express love as love. How do we express in the very texture and substance of our organizations the humanity that defines us and connects us to each other and beyond, to the natural world and to the whole beyond what our conscious self can grasp.
I think what really emerged for me there, just listening to both of you, I think Otto, you spoke about big institutions and the interiority, like how does it shift from within? Karima, you gave that, I think, wonderful example of people in these positions of authority, in these positions of power. There is fear, there is metrics, there is need to kind of monitor performance in a certain way. But here there was something that changed again. And something I'm understanding about this process that's common to what both of y'all shared is like there is this kind of reflection, and Otto, you said the system doesn't change unless the consciousness shifts, and the consciousness doesn't change unless the system sees itself. And so I think the system seeing itself, and Karima, I think that's what you're referring to as mirroring. The system basically has to, and we as gardeners, as people who are facilitating, catalyzing that change, have to play this mirroring role to allow the system to see itself. So I think that role of mirroring seems to be a really powerful and important role that we as innovators need to play. I think just in the interest of time, we're nearing the end. Wanted to leave with just one final, an invitation to both of you to share something. And this is personal, and then we're going to open it up just for people to start sharing what's emerging for them as well. So wanted to bring in just an image, and here's an image. So yesterday, India celebrated Gandhi Jayanti, which is the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, and so I grew up in a city called Pune in India, and this is the Aga Khan Palace. It's just a few minutes away from where I grew up. And what's amazing, growing up, I had no idea this existed, but actually, Gandhi he was in house arrest here for an extended period of time, and just to the role of the gardener. So everyone knows, of course, Gandhi, but there was someone else who played an extremely crucial role, who in some ways was the gardener for him, and that was this individual here, who was his secretary for over 2 to 3 decades, and his name was Mahadev Desai. But Mahadev Desai passed away at that very building. So in, I think, 1942, he passed away, and Gandhi was deeply distraught. And he shared something that's inscribed on the wall there, which has stayed with me ever since. And it's this. So what Gandhi said is, the role that Mahadev played in my life is that he reduced himself to zero. And I think why this is alive, because Otto, you spoke about there's this space in the middle which is empty, and so wanted to just invite both of you, this idea of the roles that we're playing, with teams, with organizations, with the larger ecosystem, like what does it mean to reduce? What does this mean to you, reducing yourself to zero? If we could just end there, and then we'll do a final closing.
What an interesting story, Arhan. Thank you so much for sharing that. Are we very short, because we really want to hear from the others? Reducing use in the age of where everyone talks about exponential organizations and so on. How do you multiply the impact of any kind of initiative, 10x, 100x? You can't do it without a zero, right? That's the key, right? Yeah. If you need to reduce something, right? And that allows you to create this collective space, right? This you need to open up, right? You need to create some openness for something new to emerge. So the 10x is not happening without the zero, right? It's very clear. You just need to look at the numbers. And so the reducing yourself to zero is the letting go part of the U process. It's the beginning of everything. So it's the foundation, really, of everything. That's what it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Otto.
Wow, Arhan, you did tell me you would choose a quote, and you took me completely by surprise. I love what you said, Otto. I would go to the movement. Now, if you go to Temkin, in Arabic, every word has a 3-letter verb. So for Temkin is mekana. And if you look at what does mekana mean, it means, is this defined as the root of Temkin. So if I do this, I do this. So it takes me to this movement, from the point to the point. And this is what the quote made me think of. But then if I want to further look at the resonant semantic field, I hear that is fused by that very root that does this. I hear imkan, which means potential. I hear mumkin, which means possible. It's fused by that same root. Imkania, possibility. But there's something else. There's mekan mekin. And mekan mekin is that space, that place. The mekan mekin in Arabic refers to the womb of the mother, the rahim, the compassion. The womb of the mother where life and love blossoms. And that blossoming life and love transforms life and love that created these conditions. We have, again, we go back to that moving like this. So this is what the quote made me think of, this. And one day, Arhan, maybe we will stop talking about each other as human beings as like this. We'll be able to talk about each other as like this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for bringing in that dimension of the movement. And so what we'll do is just now just start crystallizing what's emerging for each one of us. And so I think Karima ended with this idea of movement. So the invitation to all of you is just take 30 seconds to sit with what's been talked about. We started with that framework and moving inwards, and now we spoke about some of these examples of change. So what's an image that's coming up for you, right? So we'll continue in the spirit of resonance. What's an image that's coming up for you right now, and maybe what's a movement that's coming up for you? So it could be a handshake, it could be some sort of a gesture. So an image and a gesture or a movement coming up, just do write those on the chat. Thanks, Chakri. Phoenix rising from the sun. I did see your hand raised as well. Sorry, we won't be able to get to you, but we'll definitely have the contact information after, so you can reach out. Hope, says Luther. The womb, says Kapil. From that space of silence, what are the images? A heartbeat. Beautiful. James, thanks for that. The beaver quietly creating ecosystems, playing the role of that gardener. Naomi says, green and thriving globe. Manisha, life cycle of a tree. Melinda, colors of nature. Vibrations and reverberations. Thanks, Lubna. Spring, the seasons coming in from Disha. Energy to contribute based on hope in the future, realizing the existentiality and essentiality of love, hands open and receiving. It's a beautiful gesture from Aditi. Thank you, everyone. Hands open and receiving is a wonderful way to pause, and hopefully we'll continue this in other ways. But for now, Disha, I'll hand back to you, and we can close out.
Thank you so much, Arhan. Thank you, Otto, and thank you, Karima, for this beautiful, beautiful space. I think each one of us is going to go back with a lot of reflections, with a lot of learnings, and a will to learn and grow as well. I should add this. And as we conclude the space, I just want to share a small poll so that we do gather feedback and we understand how to increase, how to enhance our spaces better as well for better learnings. So please, there's a poll on your screen. It would hardly take a couple of, not more than a minute. Please do fill it out. And I hope this session leaves everyone with a seed or a spark to think and work upon. And my heartfelt gratitude, like our entire team is super thankful to the speakers and the co-creators for just creating this wonderful space for each one of us.